What happens when a morning show host decides to question whether a viral sensation is a real artist or just a social media gimmick, and picks a fight with a man who spent a decade being told he didn't have the right look to be a star? What you're about to witness is one of the most emotionally charged confrontations ever captured on morning television. The moment when Teddy Swims, the tattooed bearded soul singer who broke every rule about what a pop star should look like, was forced to defend not just his music, but his very right to exist in the spotlight. Good Morning America's studio went silent. The questions turned cruel, and a man who had spent years being underestimated showed America exactly why you should never judge an artist by their appearance. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments, because this confrontation will change everything you think you know about what it takes to make it in the music industry. Times Square Studio had a different energy that Friday morning. Word had spread that Teddy Swims was performing and doing an interview. And the crowd gathered outside the windows was notably younger, more diverse, holding signs with lyrics from Lose Control and wearing homemade t-shirts with his face on them. This wasn't the usual morning show demographic. These were true believers, fans who had discovered him on YouTube years before TikTok made him a household name, who had watched him grow from a bedroom cover singer to one of the most powerful voices in modern music. When Teddy Swims walked onto the set, the contrast with the polished GMA aesthetic was immediate and striking. At 32 years old, he was a big man with a bigger presence. His beard full and wild, tattoos covering his arms and creeping up his neck, his signature long hair pulled back. He wore a simple black t-shirt that stretched across his broad frame and moved with the easy confidence of someone who had finally stopped apologizing for taking up space. There was something almost defiant about his presence. In an industry that valued sleek, manufactured perfection, Teddy Swims looked like he had wandered in from a completely different world. And that was exactly the point. He had spent years being told he didn't fit, didn't belong, didn't have the look. And now he was one of the biggest artists in the country, proving every single one of those people wrong. His voice was the thing that had changed everything. A voice that could move from a whisper to a roar that carried echoes of the great soul singers he had studied, that made people stop scrolling and listen. That voice had been his ticket out of anonymity, his answer to everyone who had said his image would hold him back. Robin Roberts greeted him with obvious warmth, clearly charmed by his humble demeanor. George Stephanopoulos offered a respectful nod of acknowledgement. But Michael Strahan sat in his chair with an expression that regular viewers might recognize as something other than welcoming. Teddy Swims, welcome to Good Morning America. Robin began with her trademark warmth. We are so excited to have you here. Lose Control has been absolutely everywhere. Congratulations on all your success. Thank you so much, Teddy replied, his voice carrying that distinctive Georgia rasp that had made him famous. I still can't believe any of this is real. Honestly, I keep waiting to wake up. Robin smiled at his humility. Well, it's very real and very well deserved. Then Michael leaned forward and the atmosphere shifted immediately. So, Teddy, Michael began, his voice carrying an edge that seemed out of place in the cheerful morning show setting. Let's talk about how you got here. You were doing YouTube covers for years, singing other people's songs. And then TikTok happened and suddenly Lose Control is everywhere. Some people might say you're more of a social media creation than a real artist. How do you respond to that? The question landed like a slap. Robin's smile faltered. George looked up from his notes with surprise. The audience, which had been buzzing with excitement, went quiet. Teddy's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained steady. I've been making music for over a decade. I've written hundreds of songs. I've performed in bars and clubs and anywhere that would have me. TikTok helped people discover Lose Control, but I wrote that song from a real place. It's not a social media creation. It's my life. But the covers, Michael pressed, clearly not satisfied with the answer. You built your following singing other people's hits. Doesn't that raise questions about whether you're a real songwriter or just a really good karaoke singer who got lucky? The word karaoke hung in the air like an insult. Several audience members shifted uncomfortably. This was not the supportive morning show interview they had expected. I did covers because that's how you build an audience when nobody knows who you are, Teddy said, his voice still controlled, but now carrying a new weight. Every artist in history has done covers. The Beatles did covers. Aretha Franklin did covers. It's how you learn the craft and connect with people before you have your own catalog. But they weren't YouTube singers, Michael countered. They came up through traditional channels. They paid their dues in ways that the industry recognized. Some people in the music business would say that viral fame isn't the same as earning your place. Teddy was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, there was something different in his voice, something raw. Who gets to decide what earning your place means? The gatekeepers who told me for 10 years that I didn't have the right look. The executives who said I was too big, too different, too much of a risk. I spent a decade being told no by the traditional channels, so I found another way. That's not cheating the system, that's surviving it. Robin tried to intervene. I think what's so inspiring about your story. No, Robin, let him answer. Michael interrupted, his eyes fixed on Teddy. Because I think this is an important conversation. The music industry has standards for a reason. Artists who come up through the traditional route have been vetted, developed, trained. When someone bypasses all of that through viral fame, aren't we lowering the bar? The accusation was brutal in its directness. Teddy's hands, which had been relaxed in his lap, clenched. Slightly, lowering the bar. His voice was rising now, the famous vocal power evident even in conversation. I've been singing since I was a kid. I've studied every soul singer from Otis Redding to Donny Hathaway. I've spent thousands of hours working on my craft in rooms where nobody was watching. The only thing I bypassed was the people who wanted to put me in a box I didn't fit in. He leaned forward, his intensity matching Michael's. You want to talk about standards? I can sing any genre. I can perform live without a single track, without auto-tune, without any of the crutches that so many legitimate artists rely on. I learned my craft the old-fashioned way, studying the masters, practicing until my voice gave out, getting better every single day for over a decade. But that's exactly my point, Michael continued, seemingly energized by the confrontation. You don't fit the typical mold, and maybe there's a reason for that mold. Maybe the industry knows what sells, what lasts, what connects with mainstream audiences, and maybe viral fame is just a shortcut that doesn't prepare artists for long-term success. George finally spoke up. Michael, I think maybe we should. No, George, I want to hear this, Teddy said, his voice now carrying an edge that made the studio feel smaller. I want to hear exactly what he's saying because I've heard it before, 100 times, 1,000 times from people who looked at me and decided before I ever opened my mouth that I didn't belong. He stood up and the movement commanded immediate attention. He was a big man and standing. He seemed to fill the space in a way that was impossible to ignore. You want to know what I've been through? You want to know about earning my place? His voice was shaking now, but not with weakness, with barely contained emotion. I spent 10 years being told I was too fat to be a star, too looking, too different. I had meetings with labels where they told me to my face that they loved my voice, but couldn't market my image. He paused, gathering himself. Do you know what that does to a person? To be told over and over that your talent isn't enough because of how you look. I went home after those meetings and looked in the mirror and hated what I saw. Not because there was anything wrong with me, but because they had convinced me there was. The audience was absolutely silent now. Robin looked close to tears. I played shows for 10 people when I knew I should be playing for thousands. I watched artists with half my talent get signed because they looked the part. I went home and wondered if everyone was right, if I should just give up and accept that this industry wasn't made for people who look like me. His voice cracked slightly, but he pushed through. And then something happened. Social media gave me a way to reach people directly, to let them hear my voice without some executive deciding whether my face was acceptable first. And you know what happened? People connected. They didn't care what I looked like. They cared how I made them feel. He pointed at Michael and there was fire in his eyes. So don't you dare sit there and tell me I haven't earned this. Don't you dare suggest that finding success through YouTube and TikTok is somehow less valid than being anointed by some industry gatekeeper. Those gatekeepers rejected me for a decade. The people chose me anyway. Michael shifted in his chair, clearly not expecting this level of pushback. I'm just asking questions that people want answered. No, you're not. Teddy shot back. You're trying to diminish what I've accomplished because it doesn't fit your idea of how success should happen. You're a former NFL player who became a TV host. Did anyone question whether you had earned your place in broadcasting? Did anyone suggest you were just a celebrity who got lucky, not a real TV professional? The counterattack was sharp and precise. Michael's face tightened. That's different. I've been doing this for years. I've proven myself. So have I, Teddy said, his voice dropping to something quieter, but somehow more powerful. The difference is you had people believing in you from the start. You fit the image. You looked like what success was supposed to look like. I had to fight for every inch of ground with people constantly telling me I wasn't good enough, wasn't right enough, wasn't thin enough to deserve a chance. He looked around the studio, making eye contact with audience members who were openly crying. I see people out there who know exactly what I'm talking about, who have been told they're too much or not enough, who have been rejected because of how they look, not what they can do. They're the reason I'm here. They're the reason I keep going, and I won't let anyone make them feel like their support doesn't count because it came through a screen instead of a record label. Robin stood up, unable to stay seated any longer. Teddy, I think what you're saying is incredibly important. Thank you, Robin, Teddy said, his voice softening when he addressed her. I can tell you actually mean that, but your colleague over there seems to think there's something illegitimate about my success, and I need to address that. He turned back to Michael. You know what lose control is about? It's about feeling so much that you can't contain it anymore. About letting yourself be vulnerable even when it's scary. About showing people your real self even when the world tells you to hide. That song came from years of pain, years of rejection, years of being told I wasn't enough. His voice was thick with emotion. Now, when people hear that song and cry, when they send me messages saying it helped them through depression or heartbreak or loss, that's not a social media gimmick. That's connection. Real human connection. And no amount of traditional industry validation can create that. It either happens or it doesn't. He paused, collecting himself. I get letters from people who say my music saved their lives. Teenagers who were bullied for being different. Adults who felt invisible their whole lives. People who saw me succeed looking the way I look and thought maybe there was hope for them, too. That's not viral fame. That's impact. That's purpose. That's why I do this. Michael seemed to be searching for a response, but Teddy wasn't finished. I've met artists who came up through the traditional route. Labels spent millions developing them, marketing them, manufacturing their image, and some of them can't even write their own songs. They lip-sync at concerts. They've never felt the terror of playing for an audience of 5 people who might walk out at any moment. He gestured to himself. I've done all of that. I've written every song. I've sung every note. I've connected with fans one by one until there were millions of them. And now someone who's never written a song in his life wants to question whether I'm a real artist. The accusation landed with devastating precision. Michael's composure was visibly cracking. I'm not questioning your talent, Michael said, his voice defensive now. I'm questioning the system that creates overnight sensations who might not have the foundation for lasting careers. Overnight, Teddy laughed, but there was no humor in it. I've been doing this for over a decade. I moved to LA with nothing. I slept on couches. I took any gig that would have me. I built a YouTube following one subscriber at a time over years. Lose Control took off after I'd already put in more work than most legitimate artists ever will. He shook his head slowly. The only thing overnight about my success is that you just noticed it. The people who have been following me for years know exactly how long this took and how hard I fought for it. He straightened his posture, and despite the casual clothes and the unconventional look, there was something undeniably commanding about him. I want to say something to everyone watching who has ever been told they don't fit, who has been rejected because of their size or their look or their background, who has been made to feel that success isn't for people like them. His voice grew stronger, more passionate. The industry will tell you that you need permission, that you need approval from the right people, that you need to look a certain way and act a certain way and fit into the boxes they've already created. But that's not true, not anymore. You can find your audience directly. You can build something real without anyone's blessing. You can prove them all wrong the way I did. He looked at Michael one final time. I don't need your validation. I don't need the music industry's validation. I have something better. I have millions of people who connected with my music because it made them feel something real. That's all I ever wanted. And no interview, no matter how hostile, can take that away from me. He began walking toward the edge of the set. Wait, Michael called out. We're not done. Teddy stopped and turned back with an expression that mixed sadness and defiance. We were done the moment you decided to question whether my success was legitimate. I came here to talk about my music, my journey, maybe inspire some kid watching who doesn't see themselves in the typical pop star. Instead, I've had to defend my entire existence to someone who's never walked a mile in my shoes." He looked at Robin and his voice softened. "Thank you for being kind to me. It means more than you know." Then he addressed the audience one final time. "To everyone out there who's different, who doesn't fit, who's been told they're too much or not enough, keep going. Build your own thing. Find your people. They're out there and they're waiting for someone who makes them feel seen. That's what art is supposed to do. That's what I try to do. And no gatekeeper can stop you if you're willing to go around them." And with that, Teddy Swims walked off the set of Good Morning America, leaving behind a studio that seemed to vibrate with the aftermath of what had just occurred. The audience sat in stunned silence, many openly crying. Robin Roberts was wiping her eyes, clearly moved by what she had witnessed. George Stephanopoulos looked at Michael with an expression that was impossible to misread, a mixture of disappointment and disbelief. And Michael Strahan sat in his chair looking like a man who had just realized he had profoundly misjudged both his target and his audience. The show cut to commercial, but everyone in that studio knew that what had just happened couldn't be smoothed over with an advertisement break. A man who had spent his entire life being told he wasn't good enough had just proven in the most public way possible exactly how wrong those people were. And he had done it not by conforming to their standards, but by completely rejecting them. What had started as a routine morning show appearance had become something far more significant. A man who had spent his life being told he didn't belong had stood up and declared that belonging wasn't about permission. It was about connection. And in that moment, watching him walk away with his head held high, millions of viewers understood exactly why Teddy Swims had broken through despite everything the industry had thrown at him. The aftermath of that interview would dominate social media for days. Fans rallied around Teddy with a ferocity that surprised even longtime industry observers. Michael Strahan would face a backlash that forced a public apology many found insufficient. And Lose Control would surge back up the charts as people rediscovered not just the song but the story behind it. Because in the end, that's what Teddy Swims represented. The possibility that talent could overcome gatekeeping, that authenticity could defeat image, that the people could choose their own stars regardless of what the industry decided was marketable. He had proven it with his career. And on that morning, he had proven it again with his words. For those who had discovered him years ago on YouTube, who had watched him pour his soul into covers in his bedroom, who had shared his videos with friends saying, "You have to hear this guy." There was something deeply validating about watching him refuse to be diminished. He had never pretended to be something he wasn't. He had never tried to fit the mold. And when someone tried to make him feel ashamed of that authenticity, he had stood up and shown exactly why millions of people had chosen him over every polished, manufactured alternative the industry had offered. That was the real lesson of that morning. Not about social media or traditional success or industry gatekeepers, but about the power of being exactly who you are, even when everyone tells you it's not enough. Teddy Swims had spent a decade learning that lesson, and in one unforgettable interview, he had taught it to everyone watching. What do you think about this incredible confrontation? Was Michael Strahan out of line, or was he just asking tough questions? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more stories that will absolutely leave you speechless.